Welcome back to Visual Storytelling. This week we will learn a bit more of how to use visual aesthetics to help us tell stories. First, let me introduce you to the law of contrast. Every time we create a contrast, we call the attention of the audience. We do this with visual elements like illumination or color, and we do it so that we can highlight important characters, elements, or part of our story. And while it is an important thing to do throughout the story, we need to avoid making things too obvious. Otherwise, our audience will know what happens before time, and the emotions we can create will disappear. Look at this succession of characters. Can you imagine what comes next? You most certainly didn't imagine this. And believe it or not, you are most likely to remember the green guy than the others, because of the way it was presented to you. We first create a succession of things. It may be images, characters, or story beats that all may look very similar. We create a familiarity with the audience, and then BAM! We break it. Like what happens at the second act of a film. We go through a succession of problems in the journey. We are familiar to how things are happening, and then we break it in the climax. So, let's start our own journey of aesthetic elements with the basis of it all, the shapes. The three main shapes that are used in art are the triangle, the square, and the circle. And only using these three shapes we can evoke various feelings. So for example, triangles can evoke a feeling of danger, direction, quickness, or even power. Squares, on the other hand, can evoke stability, roughness, strength, formality, or this feeling of man-made objects. Circles can evoke a feeling of flow, motion, or things moving. We found it all around nature. It is a very friendly shape, and it gives us a sense of wholeness and creativeness. A good example of contrasting shapes is the short film Inner Workings. In it we found a square man in his square work, and all around him many curves and circles evoke him to enjoy life. Even the personalities and the way the characters act in the short reflects their shapes. Or perhaps more known is Wall-E. Wall-E and Eve are great examples of contrast. Their movement evokes their shapes. Eve is free, moving around graciously, while Wall-E needs to make automatic and robotic movements. Now let's talk about one of the greatest tools of any visual artist, composition. If you come from any art background, you'll understand the importance of composition. It can guide you through an image and tell you where or what to look at. Composing a scene can also play a role in making the audience feel the mood of the shot or scene. There exists a variety of ways to compose a scene. However, before all of that, I think it is important for you to understand first that you can compose your own scenes merely using simple shapes. For instance, we can box our characters in a shot and make the audience feel like they're somehow trapped. You can make them stand on the peak of the mountain, so to speak, or at the end of the film, make people feel like they are in the culmination of all of their effort. Circles have an interesting quality of isolating a frame. I love this type of shots since it can create a very personal and close frame in your story. I will leave a link with more information on different types of shots and their uses on the description. Be sure to check them out. Now let's talk about something very important on composition, and that is the golden ratio. The golden ratio is a mathematical proportion for rectangles that was found to be the most pleasant for the eye. First used in math, then in architecture, and later on in painting. Nowadays in composition it's represented with this spiral called the Fibonacci spiral. For visual artists, especially ones that try to convey a message or story in a single image, this set of rectangles and spiral are a great tool since they can guide the eye through an image. It can tell you where to start and where to end, and without noticing, your eye will go through a mini journey throughout the image. You will notice that while composing a scene, various objects go in the path of this spiral, and props and elements will fill the space of these rectangles in their sizes. This is called the phi grid, and it is used to simplify the golden ratio for composition. Take a look at the rectangles and you will realize that their shapes are defined by the proportion of 1 to 1.16. So if you take the longest side of the first rectangle, that will be the one for the 1.16 of the next rectangle. And since they rotate when the next rectangle is created, you will end up with a spiral. Now this phi grid it may look very similar to the rule of thirds, which you may have already heard about. In the rule of thirds, you break your image into 9 rectangles of the same size. The idea is that in these lines you can align the subject of your image, with those 4 intersections or points being the main focal point of any image. If we put them side by side, you can realize that they are not the same, but they are very similar, and in fact are used for the same purpose. Whenever I create an illustration or compose an image, I like to put this guide right on top of everything. This way I can train my eye and be more accurate with the way I create images. I will leave this image with transparency of the description so you can use it. Remember that you can use whatever works best for you when you are making a movie, a sequence or a composition. And try to vary what you use so that the sequence won't feel stiff and repetitive. Remember that this is motion pictures that we are talking about. Finally, I want to remind you that the world you create, even though it may be a 2D drawing, exists in a 3D environment, where there is layers and cameras that you can use in your favor. For example, a tilt on the camera can make a disorienting or fantastic feel on your image. Depth and three-dimensionality can be achieved with various elements around your image. So, if you combine these with an interesting composition, you can create rich shots filled with emotion. Start imagining what type of shots you can make with your story.